Eken Maduekwe was not a man you could lie to twice. He was 34, tall, quiet, and so calm that grown men straightened their ties when he walked into a room. By the age of 29, he already owned Maduekwe Haulage, a fleet of 141 trucks moving cement, diesel, and frozen fish across the whole country, from the ports of Lagos to the dust of Maiduguri. In business circles, nobody called him by his name. They called him Sir, even the men old enough to be his late father. But money is a strange thing. It fills your garage and quietly empties something else. Every woman who smiled at Ekini was really smiling at the trucks parked behind him. Before they asked how he slept, they asked what he drove. Before they asked what kind of man he was, they counted his companies on their fingers. He had learned to watch their eyes. The eyes always went to the wristwatch first, then the shoes, then the car key on the table, and only after all of that, sometimes, to his face. Then one evening, at 9:47, a beautiful girl named Tonia leaned across the table and told him that if he truly loved her, he would buy her something expensive to prove it. Eken smiled. He said nothing. But that night, something in him went cold and still, and he made a decision that would carry him out of his mansion and into the one place no billionaire in Lagos had ever chosen to walk. If you love emotional dramas that teach real lessons about the human heart, subscribe right now, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The restaurant that night was the kind where the menu had no prices, because the people who ate there did not need to ask. Soft music, cold air, waiters who moved like they were afraid of the floor. Tonia sat across from him in a yellow dress that cost more than what most of his drivers earned in 3 months. And she had spent the whole evening laughing at jokes that were not funny. Eken watched her the way a man watches the rain through a window, present but separated by glass. "You are not even listening to me," Tonia said, pretending to pout. "I am listening." "Then tell me what I said." "You said your friend Bisi just bought a Range Rover, and you do not understand why your own man has not done the same for you." She blinked. She had not expected him to remember word for word. For a moment, something flickered behind her face, and then she covered it with a brighter smile and reached for his hand. "Eken, you know I love you for who you are. The money is not important to me. But if you love me, you have to show it. There is one bracelet I saw. Diamonds. It is not even much. For a man like you, it is small change. If you truly love me, you will get it for me before my birthday." There it was. The same sentence, in a new mouth. He had heard it from Adeze. No, not Adeze. He had not met Adeze yet. He had heard it from Gozika last year, and from Patience the year before that, and from a girl whose name he could no longer remember, who had cried real tears in his car over a handbag. "If you love me, prove it," as if love were a receipt. Eken looked at Tonia for a long time. He did not feel anger. Anger needs hope behind it, and his hope had gone quiet a long time ago. He only felt tired, the way a man feels tired of a road he has walked 1,000 times in the dark. "I will think about it," he said. When she left, he did not stand to walk her out. He sat alone in that beautiful cold room with the music playing for nobody, and he asked himself one honest question. What if not a single woman alive could love me without all of this? He did not sleep that night. By 2 in the morning, he was standing at the tall glass window of his bedroom, looking down at his own compound, the long gate, the security lights, the 2 cars his drivers had washed by hand that afternoon. Comfort everywhere, and inside it, a man who could not remember the last time someone had spoken to him like he was simply a person. The next morning, his mother came to the house. Mrs. Ngozi Maduekwe was a small woman with a straight back and eyes that did not miss anything. She had grown up poor in Nsukka before she married Eken's father, and she had never let the wealth wash that memory out of her. Every Tuesday she drove herself, with only one driver, to a small clinic in Mushin, that her foundation kept running the Ngozi Maduekwe Care Home, a quiet place that helped pregnant women who had no husband, no money, and nowhere to go. She did not talk about it at dinners. She did not put her name on banners. She just paid the bills and held the babies. That morning, she found her son standing at the window with the cup of tea she knew he would not finish. "You look like a man who has been fighting with his own thoughts," she said. "I am managing, Mama." That is the thing people say when they are not managing at all." He almost smiled. She sat down on the edge of his reading chair, folded her hands, and waited the way only mothers can wait. "Mama, let me ask you something," he said. "When you married Papa, did you know he had money?" Ngozi laughed softly. "Your father had nothing but a borrowed Peugeot and big mouth. The money came after. I married the mouth, not the money." "That is exactly my problem," Ekane said. "Nobody is here for the mouth. They are here for the trucks." His mother studied him. She did not rush to comfort him, because she had raised him, and she knew comfort would only make him hide. After a while, she said, "Then maybe you are looking for love in the wrong rooms. Real things do not grow on marble floors, my son. They grow in the dust, where people cannot afford to pretend." She did not know it, but she had just handed him the whole idea. 2 days later, Ekane called the only man he trusted completely. Sylvester Ibe, everyone called him Sly, had worked beside the Maduekwe family for 19 years. He was older than Ekane by 12 years. Quiet, careful with his words. The kind of man who noticed when you were lying to yourself. He arrived in the study and sat down, and Ekane told him the plan. For a long moment, Sly said nothing. Then he said, "Sir, say that again." Slowly. "Because I think my ear has done me wrong. I want to go undercover in my own company," Ekane repeated. "The Apapa Depot, as a casual worker, a loader, a nobody. Nobody there knows my face except on a wall portrait they walk past once a year. I will use the name Ez. You and one person in HR will be the only ones who know. The rest will think I am a new hand sent down for the rainy season backlog." "And why, in the name of everything good, would you do this?" Ekane leaned back. "2 reasons. The first, I will not lie to you about. I want to know if a woman can look at me when I have nothing and still see something worth loving. The second is for the company. I keep signing reports that say my workers are happy. I want to stand inside one of those reports and find out if it is true." Sly rubbed his face with both hands. He had known this boy since the boy was 22 and grieving and stubborn, and he knew that look. Once Ekane's mind set like cement, you did not break it. You only got dust on your hands trying. "If you slip," Sly said quietly, "if one trader recognizes you, the whole market will know by evening. Your father will hear it before night. Then I will not slip. And if you fall in love with a poor canteen girl and your father refuses her, you know how that man thinks. Status. Image. He will not clap for you." Ekane was quiet. He had not thought that far. He would very soon wish he had. "Just help me, Sly, please." And because 19 years is a long time to love a stubborn man, Sly nodded. "God help us both." Within 4 days it was arranged. Sly found the paperwork, a cover story, a battered locker, and a single room in a Face Me, I Face You compound in Ajagunle, far from anyone who would ever look twice at a billionaire. Then came the harder part, turning Ekane into Eze. The wristwatch went into a drawer. The Italian shoes were replaced with rubber sandals that had already walked some other man's miles. He pulled on a faded Ankara shirt that had lost its pattern to too many washes, trousers that no longer remembered their crease, and a cap that smelled faintly of someone else's sweat. He stopped shaving the careful edges of his beard and let it grow rough and uneven. He scrubbed the cologne off his skin until he smelled of nothing but soap and dust. When he finally stood in front of the cracked mirror in that small room, he went still. The man looking back at him was tired, ordinary, forgettable. A man you would push past at a bus stop without seeing. Good, Iken thought. That is exactly what I need. But looking the part was the easy lie. The work was the truth. His first morning at the Apapa depot began at 5:40 a.m., under a sky the color of dirty water. The yard was already alive. Engines coughing, men shouting numbers, the iron groan of container doors, the smell of diesel and rotten fruit, and the river beyond the wall. Ease stood there in his borrowed sandals, holding the small bag Sly had given him, and for the first time in years, nobody looked at him at all. A heavy man with a whistle around his neck, and a belly that arrived before he did, came marching toward the new workers. This was Ogre Friday, the yard foreman. 22 years on that concrete. The kind of man who had been stepped on for so long that the only joy he had left was stepping on others. You, new hand, Eze or whatever your village calls you, Friday barked. Are you here to load trucks or to admire the lagoon? Move. By 7 in the morning, Ekin understood things about his own company that no report had ever told him. He learned that a 50-kilo bag of cement does not care how rich you used to be. He learned that you carry it on your shoulder, bent forward, and your spine learns a new language. He learned that the men around him had started at 5:30 and would not stop until past 6 in the evening, 13 hours, and that the overtime they were owed somehow always came out short on payday. And nobody asked why out loud. Because the man who asked last year was sent home and never called back. He learned that there were no proper gloves, that a boy of 19 named Sunday had a scar across his palm from a steel banding wire that should never have cut him. Because there should have been a tool, and there was no tool. He learned that water in the yard cost money the workers did not have. So they drank from a tap by the wall that even the dogs avoided. And he learned what it felt like to be invisible. At 10 that morning, sweating through the borrowed shirt, Ease set a bag down 2 seconds slower than Friday liked. The foreman descended on him at once, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. You think this is your father's parlor? Eh? You think because you have small height and fine teeth somebody will marry you? You are a pair of hands. That is all. Hands I am renting by the hour. When the hands are slow, I throw them away and rent new ones. So move those bones before I help you remember your level. The yard laughed, the tired laugh of men who laugh, so they are not the one being laughed at. Ekin felt the heat climb up the back of his neck. In another life, in another shirt, that man would have lost his job before he finished the sentence. In this shirt, Ekin bent his back and picked up the next bag, and something cracked open inside him. Not anger, shame. Because these were his men. This was his name on the gate. This was his report that said everyone was happy. By noon, his hands were trembling. His shoulders had passed pain and arrived at numbness. His throat burned. When the brake bell rang, the men shuffled toward a low open shed at the edge of the yard, where a long table and a few benches sat under a rusted roof. This was the canteen. And this was where he first saw her. She was behind the serving table, ladle in hand, hair packed back in a simple net, sleeves pushed up to the elbow. Not loud. Not pushing. She moved with the steadiness of someone who had been carrying a household on her back for a long time and had stopped expecting anyone to carry it for her. When the men came to her, tired and rough and short on words, she did not flinch from them. She called the old ones Papa. She called the young ones by name. Her name was Adeze Nwankwo. She was 26. She cooked and served rice and stew and bread for men who could barely afford it, and she carried, in a small exercise book in her apron pocket, a record that would have frightened Ogre Friday badly if he had ever seen it. Ise joined the line, his money counted out in coins, because Ise did not carry notes. When he reached the front, Adizes looked up at him a new face and gave him the small nod she gave every new face. Rice and stew? Yes, thank you, Ma. She paused. Most of the men did not say thank you. They were too tired, and the world had stopped saying it to them, so they had stopped saying it back. She served him a portion that was, he noticed, slightly more generous than the man before him had received. He found a place on the bench and ate the way hungry men eat, with attention. It was just rice. It was the best thing he had eaten in years. Then he saw the thing that changed everything. An old loader they called Papa Equime came to the front of the line, counted his coins 3 times with shaking fingers, and came up short. Not by much. 20 naira, maybe 30. He stood there, ashamed, and started to say he would take only bread, only water. It was fine. He was not even very hungry. Adeze did not let him finish. She had already opened her own small purse under the table, quietly, without a speech, without lifting her face, so the old man would have to watch her do it. She added the balance herself and pushed a full plate toward him. "Papa, sit down before the rice gets cold. You hear?" The old man's eyes went wet. He blessed her in Igbo, the long kind of blessing that comes from somewhere deep, and she only smiled and waved it away as though she had done nothing at all. Ekin sat very still on that bench, a spoon halfway to his mouth, and watched her. He had given millions to causes. He had signed checks with so many zeros that the zeros stopped meaning anything. He had built a wing of a hospital and let them put a plaque on it. And not one of those acts had cost him what this woman had just spent, because she did not have it to spare, and she gave it anyway. And she made sure the man would not feel small while receiving it. That was a kind of wealth Ekene Maduekwe did not own. He did not know her name yet. He did not know that within a few weeks she would defend him in front of people who mocked him, or that she would one day stand in a market with his secret growing inside her, too proud and too kind to come and break his life apart. He only knew one thing, sitting there in the dust with cement on his shoulders and coins in his pocket. He wanted to know her. For the next several days, Easy made sure he was always at the back of the canteen line, so that by the time he reached the table the rush had passed, and there was room to talk for 1 minute. 2, if Friday was on the far side of the yard. It started with nothing. "Greetings. Good afternoon, Ma. You again. You like to be last. The food tastes better when you are not rushing." She gave him a look, half a smile fighting it. "You have mouth, A's." Little by little the minute grew. She learned that he was new, that he kept to himself, that he did not gossip or beg or try his luck the way some of the men did. He learned that she had been running the canteen for almost 3 years, that her father had died of a stroke when she was 21, and that she lived with her mother in 2 rented rooms in Mushin and sent money home that was never, ever enough. "My mother's medicine alone is 6,000 a month," she said one afternoon, wiping the table. "Her blood pressure, then food. Then the rent that the landlord increases like it is his birthday every year. I cook for these men all day, and some nights I go home and there is nothing in my own pot." But, she shrugged, a small movement. "God is not asleep. I am still standing." She said it without drama. That was what struck him. She was not performing her suffering for sympathy. She was just reporting the weather of her life. But the thing that pulled Akin fully toward her happened on a Thursday. A delegation came to the depot that day, men in stiff collars from head office, the kind of audit committee Akin himself used to send and never follow. Word went round the yard that everyone should look busy and say everything was fine. Oga Friday sweated through his shirt, arranging the lie. That afternoon, one of the auditors wandered to the canteen for tea and asked Adeze, casually, how the workers were treated. The kind of question that expects the kind of answer that keeps everyone safe. Adeze put down her cloth. "You really want to know, sir, or you want the answer that lets you finish your tea?" The man blinked. "Because if you want the truth," she said, her voice low and steady, "the men in this yard work 13 hours and get paid for 8. There are no gloves, so they cut their hands on the wire. There is no clean water, so they drink from a tap the dogs will not touch. Last month a boy fell from the back of a trailer because there was no rail, and Ogre Friday told him to stop crying and get back up before he loses the day's pay. And every single one of these men is too afraid to tell you this, because the last person who complained is now at home with no job and 3 children. So that is the truth, sir. But please finish your tea. The auditor said nothing useful. He muttered something about looking into it and walked away fast, and nothing changed that week. But Eze had heard every word. He stood at the edge of the shed with his cap low over his eyes, a loader nobody was looking at, and he felt the ground shift under him. This woman, who had nothing, who could be sacked tomorrow and replaced by noon, had said to a stranger's face the exact words his entire reporting structure had spent years burying. She had risked her one job to tell the truth on behalf of men who could not tell it themselves. He had spent 34 years surrounded by clever people who told him what he wanted to hear. He had finally found someone who told the truth, even when it was dangerous. That night, in his small hot room, Iker wrote everything down. 13 hours, no gloves, the wire, the tap, Sunday's scar, the boy who fell. He wrote it the way a man writes a debt he intends to pay. And he wrote one more line, almost without meaning to. Her name is Adeze. The rain came on a Friday. The way Lagos rain always comes, no warning, no mercy, the sky simply opening like a burst pipe. Within minutes, the depot yard had turned to brown soup. Men ran for the shed. Trucks sat steaming, and Adeze, caught crossing the open ground with a tray of empty bowls, slipped on the wet concrete. Eze was the closest. He moved without thinking, the way you move when something in you has already decided. He caught her arm before she went down, steadied the tray with his other hand, and for a second the two of them stood there in the downpour, soaked through, her hand gripping his forearm, the rain hammering on the iron roof like applause. "You almost broke your head," he said, more frightened than he meant to sound. "And you almost broke my bowls," she said, breathing hard. And then she laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her, and he laughed too. And something quiet and important happened in that small, wet moment that neither of them named. After that, the shape of the days changed. He started waiting for her after her shift, just to walk part of the way to her bus stop. Nothing more. He bought roasted corn from a woman by the gate and handed her one without a word. And she took it without a word, and they cracked the hot kernels off the cob and argued about whether the soft corn or the dry corn was better. He thought soft, she thought dry. She said a man who liked soft corn could not be trusted with serious decisions, and he laughed so hard he had to stop walking. She liked that he listened. Most men she had met talked at her about themselves, their plans, the big things they would do once their breakthrough came. Eze asked questions, and then waited for the whole answer. He noticed things. He noticed when she was tired before she said it. He noticed the day her mother's medicine had gone up again, just from the set of her shoulders, and he quietly carried her tray for her without making it a thing. And sometimes she could not explain this part. He did not feel like a loader at all. It was small things. The way he held his cup. The way his anger stayed locked behind his eyes, even when Ogre Friday insulted him, as though he was choosing not to spend it. The way he sometimes used a word that did not belong to the yard, and then caught himself. There were moments she looked at him, and felt she was looking at a man wearing borrowed clothes over a different life. But her heart had already started leaning toward him, and a heart that is leaning does not like to ask hard questions. So she let it go. One evening, after several of those quiet walks, he asked if she would come and see where he stayed. He saw the hesitation cross her face. At once she was a decent woman, and she did not move carelessly, so he said it plainly. "Come in the afternoon, when the compound is full of people and noise, when nothing can be hidden." She thought about it, and she came. The room was small. A thin mattress on a frame, one plastic chair, a bucket in the corner, a few shirts on a rope. Nothing in it suggested a man who owned anything at all. A Daisy stood in the doorway and looked around, and Akin watched her face the way a man watches a verdict. There was no disgust in it. No pity either. Only a quiet, careful understanding. "It is clean," she said simply, and sat down on the plastic chair. He sat on the edge of the mattress, and then, because he could not stop himself, he tested her one more time. The last time, he promised himself. "A days," he said. "Look at this room. Look at my work. No woman in her right mind would want to build a future with a man like me. I have nothing. I will probably always have nothing." He watched her closely. This was the question under all the other questions. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Who told you that?" He did not answer. "My father had nothing," she said. "He drove a Danfo for 20 years. He never owned the bus, never owned the house, never owned a single good thing. But when he walked into our 2 rooms in the evening, my mother's whole face would change. Because he came home with honesty in his pocket. And that is worth more than what most rich men come home with." She looked at him steadily. A poor man with a clean heart is a better foundation than a rich man with a proud one. Anybody who tells you different is selling something. The room went very still. Outside, children shrieked over a game. A woman called someone to come and eat. A radio played High Life 2 doors down. And inside, Ekeni Maduekwe felt something he had not felt. In so long he had forgotten its name. Not excitement. Relief. The relief of a man who has been thirsty for years and has finally tasted clean water. He had found her. The thing he came into the dust to find. She was sitting on a plastic chair in a borrowed room, telling him his worth had nothing to do with his money. And that was the exact moment the lie became unbearable. Because now, every day, he stayed silent. He was no longer testing her. He was deceiving her. He had become the very thing he despised a person, using someone's open heart for his own purposes. He could not keep it up. He would not. But first, she did something that broke the last of his resistance. A few days later, she introduced him to 2 of her friends near the bus stop. One of them, a sharp-tongued salesgirl named Ngozika, looked Eze over from his rough cap down to his tired sandals and laughed. "This one? Adeze, out of all the men in Lagos, you chose a depot loader, a man who carries cement on his back. You, that is so fine, you could not even find a driver, a small businessman, anybody. You have really brought your standard down low." Eze said nothing. He had heard worse from Oga Friday by 8 a.m., but he watched Adeze. She did not laugh. She did not lower her eyes. She stepped a little closer to him, deliberately, and she said, "I love him exactly as he is. You are looking at his sandals. I am looking at how he treats me. He respects me. He has a clean heart. He carries my tray when I am tired, and he has never once asked me for anything. So before you laugh at the man I chose, ask yourself whether the man laughing beside you would do half of that for you." Ngozeka opened her mouth and found nothing in it. Adeze had defended him. Not in a whisper, not in private. In the open, in front of her friends, with her chin up, choosing him out loud. That night, Akin barely slept. He was terrified not of his father, not of the business, but of the thing he now had to do. He had to tell her the truth, and the truth was going to hurt her, and there was every chance she would walk away from him for it. He had built this beautiful, fragile thing on a lie, and now he had to set the lie on fire and pray that what he felt for her and what she felt for him would still be standing in the ashes. He asked her to keep a free afternoon for him. "I want to talk to you properly," he said. "It is important." When the day came, she waited at the place he had named, expecting to see Easy in his faded shirt come strolling up with corn in his hand. A black car stopped in front of her instead. She stepped back, the door opened, and a man got out clean-shaven at the edges, in a shirt that fit like it had been made for his exact body, polished shoes, no cap, no dust, a watch on his wrist that caught the sun and threw it back. It took her 3 full seconds to understand that the man was Ise. "A daze," he said gently. "Please, get in. Let me explain everything. You deserve to hear it from me." She did not move. Her eyes went from his face to the car to his face again, and something in her began to fold inward. But in the end, with her heart pounding and her hands cold, she got in. He drove her to a quiet place, a small garden behind a guest house, where no one would interrupt. They sat across from each other, and he did not hide anymore. "My name is Ekin Maduekwe," he said. "I am not a loader. I own the depot. I own the company. I am the word people use is billionaire." He made himself hold her eyes. "I dressed as Ise because I was tired of women who only saw my money. I wanted to know if anyone could love me when I had nothing, and then I met you. And you treated me like a human being. You fed an old man from your own purse. You told the truth to that auditor when it could have cost you everything. You defended me to your friends. You looked at a man with nothing and saw something worth keeping." His voice dropped. "I fell in love with you, Ades. That part was never the disguise. That part was the only true thing in all of this." For a long time she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was very quiet, and it cut deeper than shouting ever could. "So every day," she said, "every single day that I was opening my heart to you, you knew. You knew who you were, and you let me believe a lie. You let me defend you. You let me feel sorry that you had nothing. You sat in my canteen and ate my rice and watched me struggle for 6,000 naira, and the whole time you had more money than I will see in 100 lifetimes. Ades, you let me stand in front of Ngozika and choose you. Do you know what that cost me? Do you know I went home proud? Proud that I had chosen a poor, honest man over everybody's opinion. And it was a performance. I was acting in a play, and I did not even know I was on the stage." Tears stood in her eyes, but they did not fall. He had expected anger. He had not expected this, the quiet, exact pain of a person who had been generous with their trust, and learned it had been spent without their knowing. "I know," he said. "I know what I did. I will not insult you by pretending it was nothing. But Adeyeze, I never meant to mock you. I was a lonely man trying to find out if loves still existed in the world, and somewhere in the middle of my own foolishness, I found you. What I feel is real. That is the only defense I have, and it is not a good one, but it is the truth." She looked away across the garden for a long time. He let her. He did not rush her, did not reach for her hand, did not fill the silence with more words. He had learned at least that much from her. When she looked back, the tears had finally fallen and dried in 2 clean lines down her face. "I do not like the lie," she said. "I am still angry about the lie. I think I will be angry for a long time." She drew a breath. "But I have to be honest, too, because one of us in this thing should keep being honest. I did not fall in love with Ise's poverty, and I am not now in love with Ikina's money. I fell in love with the man who carried my tray, and that man is sitting in front of me, whatever name he is wearing today." He reached for her hand then, and this time, slowly, she let him take it. He should have stopped there. He should have let the happiness be enough. But Akin believed the way decent people sometimes wrongly believe that the truth, once told, fixes everything. He believed his family would see what he saw. He believed that a woman who had loved him in the dust was worth more than any polished daughter of his father's friends, and that anyone with eyes would agree. So he took Adeze to the family house. She dressed simply and well, a modest blue dress, her hair neat, no loud makeup, nothing pretending to be what it was not. She looked exactly like herself, and to Akin that was the whole point. The Maduekwe house sat behind high gates, at the end of a long drive, the kind of silence around it that only old money can buy, marble that no one was allowed to scuff. furniture that looked like it had never held the weight of a tired body. Daisy took it all in without flinching, her back straight, her hands folded. Mrs. Ngozi met them first, and her face, when she saw the girl, did something complicated, a flicker of recognition that Daisy did not catch, and Ekin did not understand. His mother greeted Adieze warmly, asked her to sit, asked about her work, and there was a softness in it that gave Ekini hope. Then his father came down. Chief Obioma Madwekwe entered a room the way weather enters a valley, broad, deliberate, certain of being obeyed. He sat, he looked at the girl, and he listened as his son explained who she was, where she came from, and how they had met. And when Ekin reached the part about the disguise, about the depot, about the canteen, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. A canteen girl, Chief Obioma said slowly, tasting the words and finding them sour. From a face me, I face you in Mushin, whose father drove a danfo, whose father was an honest man, Ekin said. You cannot marry a girl like this. Flat. Final. As though he were correcting a figure on a balance sheet. The room went very quiet. Adaze lowered her eyes, but she did not shrink. She sat with her hands folded and received the insult with a stillness that was, in its own way, more dignified than anything the rich room contained. What do you mean? A girl like this? Ekin's voice had changed. You are a Maduekwe, his father said. You carry this name. The woman who enters this family must be able to stand in certain rooms, hold certain conversations, reflect a certain standing. Love is a feeling. Marriage in a family like ours is a structure. You do not lay a foundation on a feeling. She loved me when she thought I was nothing, Ekin said. When she thought I carried cement for a living. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand that I searched for that my whole adult life and could not find it in any of the rooms you approve of? It means she is sentimental, his father replied. It does not mean she is suitable. That was the wrong thing to say. Ekin stood. She is more suitable to be in this family than any woman who would walk through that gate counting our trucks. She fed a hungry old man from a purse that had almost nothing in it. When was the last time anyone in this room did something that cost them? Mind how you speak to me. She treated me like a human being when she believed I had nothing to give her. That is the only test that has ever mattered, and she is the only person who has ever passed it. Through all of it, Adize said nothing. She did not beg. She did not weep in front of them. She simply sat and bore it, and her silence was louder than any argument. At last Ekin held out his hand to her. Let us go. They had nearly reached the door when his father's voice stopped them. If you walk out of this house with that girl, Chief Obioma said, not even raising his voice, then you walk out of this family. Leave her or lose your seat in the company, your accounts, your inheritance, everything. Choose well, because there is no road back. It was an ultimatum, laid flat on the marble like a contract waiting for a signature. Ekin did not need a single second to think. Then I choose her, he said, and he walked out into the evening with Adeyeze's hand in his. That same day he left the family house for good. And here is the part that even Adeyeze did not understand at first. He refused to touch his own personal money. He had enough in accounts his father could not reach to keep them comfortable for the rest of their lives. He did not touch 1 naira of it. He needed to prove something, not only to his father, but to himself. That choosing love had been enough. That he was not weak without the trucks. That the life he had finally seen from inside the depot was not beneath him. So they began again with almost nothing. Only the small savings the loader had honestly earned. They rented a single room in Mushin, not far from Adieze's mother. He found quiet, humble work, the kind a man does with his hands, asking no one for favors. And for the first time, Ekine Maduekwe lived exactly the life he had spent a few weeks merely visiting. For a while, it was good. Better than good. They cooked together in the evenings rice some nights, yam and egg, when that was what the money allowed, indomie when it was lean. They laughed over small meals. They shared one narrow bed and one weak fan that only turned when there was light. On better nights, they sat outside with sasha water and talked until the mosquitoes drove them in. They were tired and they were broke, and they were, for a season, genuinely happy. But hardship does not knock, it lets itself in. The rent was small, but small rent grows teeth when the money is short. Her mother's medicine did not get cheaper. The fan died and there was no money to fix it. The room held the heat like a kettle, and Ekin, who had once signed away the cost of a car without looking at the number, now stood in front of a provision cellar, counting coins to decide between fish and oil, because he could not afford both. He never complained. That was the part that broke Adeze. He never once said, "I am tired of this." He never said, "I miss my old life." He never used what he had given up as a weapon against her. He just kept going, quiet and steady, the same man who had carried her tray, and it made her feel like she was drowning him. She would wake in the night and find him lying awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark. "Ekin, are you all right?" "I am fine. Sleep." "You always say that." "Because it is always true." But she knew it was not, and slowly a terrible thought put down roots in her chest. She loved him more than she had loved anything, and she was beginning to believe that loving him was the same as ruining him. "This is not the life you are used to," she said one night. "I told you, I chose this. But why should you keep suffering because of me? You had everything. You walked away from all of it to live in one hot room with a canteen girl and a dying fan." "I am not suffering for you," he said. "I am living with the woman I love." There is a difference. She did not believe him. Not because she did not love him, because she did. She could not watch him count coins and pretend it did not cut her open. Then his father reached out. Chief Obioma did not call with warmth. He sent a message through a man he trusted, and when Ekin finally went to see him, his father was as cold and certain as ever. "There is still a way back," the old man said. "What way?" His father studied him for a long moment before he answered. "Marry Dabarechi Onuoha." Ekene's face hardened. Dabarechi was the daughter of Chief Obioma's biggest business partner, beautiful in the loud, expensive way that demanded an audience. Proud, fond of attention more than she was fond of anyone. Everything about her was the exact opposite of Adeze. "I cannot marry her." "Then stay where you are," his father said simply. "In your hot room, counting your coins, watching the woman you love grow old before her time. The choice has always been yours." Ekin walked out with something burning in his chest. He hated the idea with his whole body. But when he got back to the room and saw Adeze sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes swollen again from crying she had tried to hide, the burning thing in his chest began, against his will, to bend. The nights got longer after that. He slept less. He listened to Adeze tell him he deserved better. He watched her grow thinner, watched the worry carve itself into a face that used to laugh at corn. And slowly, the impossible thing began to feel like the only thing left. One night, after she had cried herself quiet again, he sat beside her and said, "If I went back, if I made peace with them, would it give you peace?" She turned to him at once. "Do not say that. I am asking you, Adeze." The tears came again, fast. "I do not want to lose you. But you do not want this life for me either. I can see it killing you slower than it is killing me." She broke then, not loudly, just completely, and held his hand and wept into his shoulder. And in that moment, Ekin understood a terrible thing. The love was still there. It was entirely there. But the peace was gone, and a love with no peace left in the house is a love that has started to drown. So after many sleepless nights, after too much silence, after watching her cry one time too many, Ekin agreed to go back. He told her on a grey morning. She did not stop him. She broke down completely the moment he left the room, but she let him go. because somewhere in her aching heart she had convinced herself it was for his good. What neither of them knew that grey morning was that she was already carrying the 2 reasons he would one day come running back. Ekin went home, and his father was pleased in the cold way of men, who never say so. His mother looked relieved too, though there was something behind her eyes that did not match the relief. Mrs. Ngozi had recognized that blue dress, that straight back, that quiet girl, and a thought had begun to trouble her that she said nothing about. Yet, Dabarechi Onuoha, on the other hand, was delighted. She had always liked wealth, attention, and the kind of social standing that turned heads at Owambe parties, and Ekin came wrapped in all 3. To her, this was not love. It was a win. The engagement was arranged with frightening speed. Aso-ebi was chosen. Halls were booked. Photographers argued over angles. Dabarechi talked endlessly about fabrics and jewelry and the entrance she planned to make. And Ekin moved through all of it with the face of a man attending his own funeral and being too polite to say so. He insisted on one thing, that they remain in the family house and properly get to know each other before any wedding. It made sense to everyone. It made sense to his father, who liked order. It made sense to Dabarechi, who liked the house. And it was in that house, free of the audience she usually performed for, that her true self walked out into the light. She woke at noon and expected the world to have waited for her. She spoke to the house staff as though they were furniture that had learned to move. If a maid was slow, she screamed. If food was late, she insulted the cook's mother. One afternoon, Ekin heard her berating the driver over how he had parked. "You call this parking? Look at this. This car is worth more than your entire bloodline, and you handle it like a wheelbarrow. Move it. And the next time you keep me waiting, I will make sure you are back on the street where I found you." Ekin stood at the top of the stairs and listened, and he thought of Adeze adding 30 naira to an old man's plate so he would not feel small. The 2 women lived in the same world. They could not have been more different inside it. Dabarechi showed no real interest in him. None. She did not ask about his day, did not notice his silences, did not want to know the man at all. She wanted the life around the man, the name, the house, the trucks, the photographs. And Ekin, watching her, grew quieter and colder by the day. He took long drives alone, just to breathe. He sat in his room for hours, remembering a hot little room in Mushin, where, even with a dead fan and an empty pot, something real had once lived. 2 things were moving in the dark while Ekin drowned in that gilded house. He knew about neither of them. The first was this. After he left, Adeze discovered she was pregnant. She noticed the tiredness first, then the dizziness, then the signs she could no longer explain away. When the clinic confirmed it, she sat with the paper in her hands for a long time, unable to move. And when a theta scan was done, the nurse smiled and turned the screen toward her and showed her not 1 heartbeat, but 2 twins. A boy and a girl, the doctor would say later. 2. The fear that came over her was enormous. The little money she had did not stretch to 1 child, let alone 2. Her body was already worn from worry. Her heart was still bleeding from his absence, and now there were 2 small lives, depending on a woman who could barely feed herself. The first person she told was her friend Chiamaka, one of the few people who had stood near her through everything. Chiamaka heard it and said immediately, "You have to tell Ekine, today. These are his children. He has money. He has to know," Adeze said. "No? Adeze, are you mad? Those babies are his. I know whose they are." Adeze's hand rested on her stomach, and I know he has gone back to that world to make peace with his family. If I show up now, pregnant, I scatter everything. His engagement, his return, his peace. I will become the poor girl who came to ruin a rich man's home. I will not do that to him. This is not the time for pride. "It is not pride," Adeze said softly. "It is the only mercies I have left to give him. I cannot give him money or comfort, but I can give him peace. So I will. Chiamaka argued. She argued for days. Adaize would not move. And when the landlord raised the rent again, and Adaize could no longer pay, she used it as the door she needed. She changed her number, gathered her mother, and moved to a cheaper, smaller place across town where Ekin, even if he came looking, would not easily find her. And he did come looking, once. He drove to Mushin one evening, when the loneliness in the big house became unbearable, just to see her from a distance, just to know she was all right. The neighbors told him she had moved out. No one knew where. She had changed her line. He stood in the street for a long time. Sly had a thread he could have pulled a name, a marketer lead, but Ekin told him to leave it. If she has moved on, he said, his voice flat, let her go in peace. I have already taken enough from her. He believed she had found someone new. He could not have been more wrong, and the wrongness would haunt him. So Adaize suffered quietly. The little she earned did not go far. Her body grew heavier and weaker as the twins grew. Some mornings she could barely rise. Some nights she pressed her hand over her own mouth so her mother would not hear her cry. She missed him not only as the father of her children, but as the man who had bought her hot corn and argued that soft was better than dry, but she buried it. And in a mansion of marble across the city, the man she was protecting had no idea that the woman he still loved was carrying not one of his children, but two. The second thing moving in the dark belonged to Sly. Chief Obioma had pushed for the merger with the Onuoha family business, and Sly, who handled the careful work, had found something that did not sit right: a string of inflated invoices running through a small shell company, money leaving the Onuoha books and going somewhere it had no business going. He pulled the thread purely as a matter of due diligence, the way you check a contract before you sign your name to it. The thread led somewhere no one expected. The shell company's payments traced, again and again, to one man, a young driver who had worked for the Onuoha family for years. And the more Sly looked, the clearer the picture became: Daberechi and that driver. A relationship she had hidden for a long time, money she had quietly funneled to him, a whole second life running underneath the engagement. That was the truth of it. Daberechi had not agreed to marry Ekin out of love, or even ambition alone. She had agreed because she could never openly marry the poor driver she actually wanted. And a marriage to a Madwekwe was the perfect cover: respectability, wealth, and a roof thick enough to hide the truth forever. Sly took it to Mrs. Ngozi before he took it to anyone else. He trusted her judgment, and he did not trust what Chief Obioma might do with it. Ngozi listened, her face still, and when he finished, she said only, "So, we have all been arranging a wedding around a lie." But before she could decide how to use it, life made the decision for her. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the day Ngozi drove herself to the Mushin clinic. Her foundation kept running. She was crossing the small waiting room when she saw a young woman sitting on the bench against the wall, heavily pregnant, exhausted in the particular way of someone who is carrying more than her body can hold. The woman's clothes were clean, but worn loose over her stomach. Her face had lost its fullness, and it was a face Ngozi knew. Adaize? Huh? The young woman looked up. For one frozen second, the two of them stared at each other, the rich mother who had helped reject her, and the canteen girl who had walked away from everything rather than scatter a man's home, and the air between them filled with all the things neither of them could say. They greeted each other stiffly. Ngozi did not even know where to begin. There was too much standing between them, too much pride, too much old pain, the memory of marble and an ultimatum. She was about to say something useless and turn away, and then Adaize swayed, the color drained out of her face. Before either woman could react, she went down. Ngozi's shout brought the whole clinic running. She and the nurses caught the girl before she struck the floor. They laid her on a bed. The doctor came quickly, and when he had checked her, he took Mrs. Ngozi aside and told her what the chart already said. The patient was carrying twins. She had fainted from exhaustion, poor feeding, and the simple weight of doing all of this alone. There had been no proper rest, no proper meals, no one to share the load. Twins. Ngozi sat down slowly on a hard plastic chair and felt something strike her in the chest. This girl had been walking the markets alone, in this condition, carrying 2 lives, while a wedding was being planned in a house full of food no one finished. When Adaze came back to herself, weak and confused, the first thing she saw was Mrs. Ngozi sitting beside the bed. She tried to rise. "Lie down, my daughter," Ngozi said quickly, and the word "my daughter" came out of her before she had decided to say it. For a moment there was only the sound of the ceiling fan. Then Ngozi asked carefully, "Adaeze, the children, who is the father?" Adaeze's eyes filled slowly. She had carried the secret so long, and she was so tired. In a small voice she told the truth. "They are Ekeen's." Mrs. Ngozi did not move for a long time. Some part of her had already known. Hearing it said aloud still landed like a stone, and on the back of the stone came a flood of shame, because now she could see, all at once, what their pride had built. They had sent their son away from the one woman who loved him without conditions. They had watched him come home hollow. And while they busied themselves protecting status and arranging a wedding around a liar, this girl had been carrying his children in silence and want. Not 1 child, 2. "Why?" Ngozi asked, and her voice had lost all its hardness. "Did you not tell anyone? Why did you not come to us?" Adaeze swallowed. "Because I did not want to scatter his new life. He went back to make peace. I could not be the one to take that from him." And that answer that this girl, abandoned and pregnant and fainting in a clinic, was still thinking of Ekene's peace, broke something open in Mrs. Ngozi Maduekwe that had been hard for 30 years. She made her decision in that clinic, on that plastic chair, and she did not waver from it again. She did not take Adaeze to the family house. She took her, instead, to a quiet property she kept in her own name, far from the tension and the marble and the man Ekene was being forced to marry. She brought Adaeze's mother to live there too. She filled the kitchen. She arranged a doctor. She did all of it in secret, telling no one, not even her son. And so, in the weeks that followed, while Ekene drowned in a house of strangers, and Dabarechi argued with the cook, the woman he still loved rested under his own mother's roof, 2 heartbeats strong inside her, waiting without knowing what the next turn of her life would bring. The labor started in the night, the way these things do, sharp pains close together, and then the careful chaos of a hospital fast voices, the doctor's calm, Adaeze's mother shaking with fear while Ngozi held her hand and told her to be strong. It was hard, it was long, and then it was over, and it was safe. 2 babies entered the world before morning, a boy and a girl, small, furious, and alive. Mrs. Ngozi stood by the bed and looked at them with tears running freely down her face. She had known they were coming. She had prayed over this exact moment. But knowing and seeing are 2 different countries, and seeing undid her. They were her son's children. They were her grandchildren. And nothing, not status, not image, not the opinion of a single soul in any marble room on earth, had ever mattered less to her than it did right then. By the next morning, Adaeze's was resting, pale and weak, 1 baby in the crook of her arm, and the other in the cot beside her. Ngozi looked at the 3 of them for a long time. Then she made up her mind that the time for secrets was finished. She drove back to the family house and found Ekene alone in his room, sitting in the dark the way he sat most days now. "Come with me," she said. "Where?" "There is someone in a hospital I want you to see." "Mama, why me?" "Who is, because I am asking you to," she said, and there was something in her face that closed his questions in his throat. So he followed her. The drive was quiet. He glanced at her several times. She stared straight ahead and said almost nothing. He thought perhaps an old relative was ill, some aunt, some family friend. He had no idea what was waiting behind the door of that room. When they entered, Ekin stopped walking and could not start again. Adiz was there, thin, pale but alive, with that same quiet steadiness even in a hospital gown, and around her were babies. One in her arms, one in the cot. He looked from her to them and back, and for several seconds his mind simply refused to hold the shape of it. "Mama," he said. "What is this?" "They are yours," Mrs. Ngozi said softly. "Your son, your daughter. Adeze has been carrying them and raising them out of nothing all this time, alone." The room went absolutely still. Ekin crossed it slowly, as though too fast a movement might make the whole thing vanish. He reached the bed. He looked at the babies, two of them, impossibly small. His, and then he looked at Adeye's, and everything in him that had been frozen for months broke at once. He went down onto his knees beside the bed and pressed one hand over his face, and for a while he could not speak at all. When the words finally came, they came shaking. "I am sorry," he said. "I am so sorry. I should never have left you. No matter what was happening in that house, no matter what they said to me, I should never have left you." Her own tears slid down her face, but she said nothing yet. "I came back to look for you," he went on, the words pouring out of him now. "After I left, I came back to Mushin. I wanted to help you, at least with money. The neighbors said you had moved, that you had changed your number, that nobody knew where you had gone. I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought you had found someone else. I told Sly to leave you in peace. I thought I had already done enough damage. I did not know. God forgive me. I did not know you were carrying our children alone." Adeze reached out one weak hand and laid it on his bowed head. "Ekin," she said, "I know the truth now. I know it was not all your fault. I know your father, and I know what that house did to both of us." A tired, watery smile touched her mouth. "And I still forgive you. I have been forgiving you a little more every day, even when I was angry. That is the thing about love nobody warns you about. It keeps forgiving you behind your back." He bowed his head again and wept beside the bed, holding her hand like a drowning man who has finally felt the bottom under his feet. And Mrs. Ngozi stood back by the door and let them have it, the tears running quietly down her own face, while two small new lives slept through the whole storm of it, unaware that they had just put a broken family back together simply by being born. There was one more thing Ekin needed to do that day. He went home, and he brought his father. Chief Obioma did not understand the urgency, but there was something in his son's voice he had not heard in a long time, and so he came. When he entered the hospital room, he stopped exactly where Ekene had stopped. He saw Adeze, he saw the babies, and he saw, before anyone said a word, what the room contained. He moved closer. He looked down at the boy in the cot, at the small face, and something in his own face shifted in a way Ekene had never witnessed in 34 years. The child had his son's exact forehead, the same mouth, the same shape that the family photographs had carried for 2 generations. The old man's eyes filled, and the full weight of what his pride had done came back on him, all at once. The ultimatum, the cruelty, the wedding he had arranged with a woman who was hiding her own lie, while the woman who had truly loved his son lay forgotten in a clinic, growing his grandchildren out of nothing. He looked at Adeze for a long time. This time he did not see a canteen girl from Mushin. He saw the mother of his grandchildren. He saw a woman who had loved his son without conditions and asked for nothing, not even when she had every right to demand everything. When Chief Obioma finally spoke, his voice had lost all its hardness. "Adeze," he said, "I was wrong. The room was very quiet. I hurt you. I hurt my son. I let pride speak where wisdom should have. I am sorry." He turned to Eken, And I was wrong about her. You chose well. I could not see it. An old man's eyes were full of the wrong things. He looked back at the babies, and then at the girl in the bed, and he said the words that changed everything. These children will never be hidden. And Adeze is part of this family from today. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. But back in the marble house, a storm had already begun to gather. Daberechi had noticed the pattern Ekene and his parents, leaving the house again and again, returning with faces that told her plainly she was being kept outside something. She asked light questions and got lighter answers. So she stopped asking and started watching. And when watching was not enough, she cornered the family driver one evening and refused to let him leave until he talked. Under enough pressure, the truth slipped loose. By the time Ekene came home, Daberechi was waiting in the sitting room, with her arms folded and fire in her eyes. "So this is where you have all been crawling off to," she said. "A canteen girl and her bastards in some hidden house, while I sit here planning a wedding like a fool." "Be careful how you speak about my children," Ekene said quietly. The quiet was worse than shouting. She called her father that night, furious, and her father called Chief Obioma the next morning, threatening to tear up the merger, to break the business ties, to make sure the Maduekwe name suffered for the insult of a broken engagement. The old Chief Obioma would have bent. This one did not. "My son will not stay chained to a dead engagement to protect a contract," he said into the phone, calm as still water. "I made that mistake once already. I buried my own grandchildren in secret because of it. I will not make it again. Tear up whatever you like." Mrs. Ngozi chose to end it herself, and she did it without a single raised voice. She called Daberechi into the sitting room one afternoon, with Chief Obioma and Ekene present, and asked her to sit. Then she placed a plain brown envelope on the table. Inside were the records. Sly had pulled the shell company, the funneled money, the payments to the driver, the long secret threaded through all of it. Daberechi looked at the papers and, for the first time since she had walked into that house, with her chin in the air, her confidence cracked clean down the middle. "You did not come here with a clean heart," Mrs. Ngozi said, without anger, which made it land harder. "You came to use my son as a roof over a life you were ashamed to claim. You wanted his name to hide your own truth. We almost let you. But this house is finished with lies, all of ours included." Daberechi tried to speak. Nothing she could have said would have helped. "I never loved you," Ekene said, not cruelly, only finishing it. "I never accepted this, in my heart. The truth is out now. There is nothing left to act." She packed and left that same week. There was no grand fight, no begging that worked. Only shame, real shame. The kind her father's money had never once had to teach her how to survive. And when she got home, her parents, who had already learned of the affair, did not open their arms. They had seen the Maduekwe connection slip through their fingers, and they blamed her for the loss more than for the lie. The proud girl who had walked through the world expecting it to part for her, now sat in her father's house, exposed, and discovered that wealth could not buy her out of consequence. For Ekene, the chain finally fell off. He went back to Adeze, and this time he came whole. No disguise, no divided loyalty, no liar's calendar. He came with the truth and with peace. Adeze's mother, who had watched her daughter suffer in silence for months, received him with a warmth that surprised him, because she had seen the tears in his eyes when he held the twins, and she had seen that her daughter still loved him. "Take care of her this time," she said, "properly." "I will." He did not rush Adeze. That was the one thing he had finally learned, that love cannot be shoved back into place just because the road has reopened. So he moved slowly. He held the babies at 3 a.m. so she could sleep. He learned which cry meant hunger and which meant only loneliness. He stayed when she needed him near and went quiet when she needed quiet. He rebuilt her trust, not with speeches, but with presence. Day after unremarkable day, until one evening she rested her head on his shoulder without thinking about it, and they both knew the worst was over. And he did not forget the depot, because the man who came back to his trucks was not the man who had left them. He remembered Ogre Friday's voice. "You are a pair of hands I rent by the hour." He remembered Sunday's scar, and the tap the dogs would not drink from, and the boy who fell with no rail to catch him. He remembered Adese telling the truth to an auditor who finished his tea, so he opened the books himself. Friday's overtime theft was laid bare in an afternoon, and the foreman who had spent 22 years stepping on smaller men was walked off the yard he had ruled. But Akin did not stop at one man, because one cruel foreman is a symptom, not the disease. He raised the wages that had been quietly starved. He paid the overtime that was owed, backdated. He bought the gloves and the rails and put clean water in the yard. He wrote new rules and signed them himself. And this time he had stood inside the report before he signed it. Then he and Adese built something together that did not have his name on a plaque. A foundation not for the cameras, but because they had both lived the thing it was meant to answer. It helped transport workers and loaders and Danfo drivers, the widows of men who died young from work that wore them out, the mothers carrying children alone. Akin brought the structure and the money. Adese brought the part you cannot buy. She remembered in her body what it was to be the person on the other side of the table, and she never once let anyone who came for help feel small while receiving it. Their wedding, when it finally came, was large. But the size of it was not the beautiful part. The beautiful part was the peace. Mrs. Ngozi smiled with her whole face. Chief Obioma stood with the right kind of pride for once. Adaeze's mother wept openly through the vows. And when Ekini looked at Adayeze simple and graceful in the middle of all that brightness, what he felt was not triumph. It was gratitude. The truth had cost him everything once, and then it had given him back more than he lost. Years later, on a quiet evening, he sat in the garden of a modest house they had chosen over a bigger one, and watched his son chase his daughter across the grass with both shoes on the wrong feet. Adayeze sat near him, laughing softly. The sun went down warm over everything, and Ekene Maduekwe, who had once gone looking for real love in the dust because he could not find it on marble, understood at last that he had found it not in spite of having nothing, but because, for one honest season, he had been willing to be nothing at all. One thing before I let you go. The class contempt and the quiet workplace exploitation you watched in this story are not only the stuff of drama, they happen in real yards, real offices, real kitchens, to real people who are told every day that they are only a pair of hands. Worker protections and what counts as a fair wage differ from country to country and from state to state. So what is illegal in one place may go unpunished in another. If you, or someone you love, is being cheated of pay, denied basic safety, or humiliated at work, please do not look for your answer in a comment section under a video. In the United States, you can contact the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, or reach out to a local legal aid clinic for real, confidential guidance. I am not a lawyer, and nothing in this story is professional advice. I am only someone who wanted to tell a story about human dignity. Remember this, wherever you are watching from, no one's worth was ever printed on a payslip, and the man who treats a loader and a billionaire with the same respect is the only truly rich man in the room.